Hey, Facebook. Welcome to episode 3 discussion. You're here tonight with Glen and Kevin, even though it says you're here with Kevin and Kevin. We're having some,
Hey, man, you should be honored. You get
we're
to
having
share
some technical difficulties tonight, but we're also here with Scott. Those of you that have listened to the episode 3 podcast that dropped today, you should be familiar with Scott. Kevin, why don't you tell everybody who Scott is? And
Yeah. Hey, are we live? Have you checked?
we are live. Yes.
Okay, cool. You've seen it pop up. Cool. Yeah, we had Scott on our podcast it was last week, but the episode that dropped today. And I met Scott a while back, probably during COVID, I guess, huh, Scott? And it seems like it probably was. Yeah. And we had a mutual friend, as we talk about on the podcast, that introduced us to each other. And I just popped in out there just outside of Planned Parenthood when the first time I met him, and he was in the middle of just really loving on a girl and telling her how great she is and how not really love. That sounds a little bit weird to say loving on a girl, but loving on a lady that was trying to decide whether or not to keep her baby. And awesome thing just to watch Scott work. And I think just since we talked last Tuesday, I believe there's been a couple more rescues, right, Scott?
Oh yeah, for sure. Last week ended up being rather slow, but they were gearing up for this week. And so yesterday and today were what you call kill days at the abortion mill. And so I knew right away on Monday, there was probably 9 to 10 cars that pulled into the parking lot within the first 30 minutes of them opening. Wow. So that I knew right away that's a kill day. But we ended up having actually 2 rescues on Monday, and one of those rescues told me about another rescue that we had that I didn't know about. So wow. It was the sister, a lady that we talked to out of an abortion yesterday. We also talked to her sister out of an abortion previously. And so our second abortion yesterday was a Hindu couple that was pulling into the parking lot, and we were able to keep them from pulling into the parking lot. Ended up talking to them for about 45 minutes. And it was a real strong conversation. I was able to share the gospel. I was able to challenge them as a man, as a woman, as being parents. They actually have 2 little girls, and they were disappointed because she was pregnant with her 3rd girl. The girl in the womb is 10 weeks old, and they were going to abort the girl and hoped to one day have a boy. But as I talked to them and just reminded them of how this girl was going to love them and they were going to love her, you begin to see her get emotional. They actually ended up pulling into the parking lot. They talked for about 15 minutes, and they kept looking at me, and then they backed up, and I thought they were going to drive towards the door, towards abortion, but they didn't. They came back to me, rolled down his window. The father gave me a salute, a thumbs up, and started clapping and said, "Thank you. We're going to keep this child."
Wow.
And so that was rescue 355.
Wow. So you've had 3 since, I think there's 352 last time we talked. So tell us, by the way, if you're just joining us, welcome to the Facebook Live. This Tuesday nights, our goal is to just kind of recap and debrief the previous episode. So we recorded last week both the episode that released today and also the episode that's going to release next Tuesday. The first one is just Scott telling a little bit about his backstory and how he ended up where he is at standing in front of Planned Parenthood. And the second one is really cool. That was a special moment with Laterica, which is a lady who about a year ago, I think, or 2 years ago, changed her mind and decided to keep her baby, thanks to Scott kind of interceding and telling her how much that baby's going to be loved. And Keyshawn, yeah, and how I think the thing that Laterica kept saying was that she was all alone in this, and you kept convincing her that she's not. So that's really cool.
Scott, I love the picture. I can't remember if it's on your page or somebody posted it and tags you in it, but it was you and Keyshawn. I guess you posted it and somebody shared it, and your comment was, such a sweet little boy, and 2 minutes after this photo, destroyed the podcast equipment. So
He did. He destroyed
you
that
guys will
room.
get
At
to
one
hear.
point, I looked. He was hanging under the table where we were all sitting. He was hanging on the bars upside down, and I just giggled. I was like, "That's a." And then Kevin's microphone just went.
Yeah. What was so cool about having them there, though, was that they could not be there. That it's particularly Keystone. He could have not been there. So like I can put up with a little bit of chaos in the room to have a baby here that would not have otherwise been here. So
yeah, that was part of just the joy of that. Yeah, it was kind of chaotic, but just hearing him and seeing his joy and his energy is just a reminder of that he is here.
Yeah, it's awesome. If you are on with us and have a question for Scott, this is a really great time to plug it in there. And I'm sure a lot of you guys are watching after the fact, and I will make sure we get your questions to Scott if that's the case as well.
Yeah.
But tell us a little bit. You said something a minute ago that if a lot of cars pull in early in the morning, it's a kill day. What do you mean by that? What's the difference what's the alternative to kill days? How does that process work?
Yeah, usually once a week they have a day where they line up most of their appointments, their abortive appointments, and they just they do them one after another. And so that when there's about 10 cars in the parking lot within the first hour, that they've set all the abortive appointments for that day, and they're going to kill a lot of children that day. And usually on a kill day, anywhere between 10 to 30 children will die that day. If it's not a kill day, then it's just a typical day where people will pull in and inquire about appointments, or they'll come in and set appointments. They'll still kill children on non-kill days. You just won't see as many die. And so we try to identify which days are kill days. Now, today was a kill day as well. And so what's happening in this time of year, as we get closer to Christmas, people are realizing they're pregnant, they're unwanted pregnancies, and they don't want to go into the holiday with the guilt of an unwanted pregnancy. So they think the answer is to abort the child. And what they don't realize is that they're going to carry a very painful shame into the holidays anyway, and it will be there the rest of their life because that pain will haunt them the rest of their life. And so, so every abortion mill is different. We also have days that are STD days where you'll see a bunch of guys come in that are getting an STD test, and then there's another day that's transgender day, and that's the day where you'll see a lot of transgenders come in for hormonal treatments as they're transgendering over to be a man or a woman. And so there's basically three different days that are identified where I stand.
And they alternate. You never really know what
you don't ever know. Yeah. Where the first place where I used to stand on Welshwood, we knew their kill day. They had 2 days that they killed children. It was Tuesday and Friday. So we were able to focus on those days. Here we don't know.
Scott, I've been watching your Facebook, and in your recent live videos, and some of the guys out there with you, it's an invitation to come stand with you guys out in front of these locations. And what somebody's listening that wants to join in on that, what do they need to know? How do they show up? What do they need to bring? What can they expect? Can you kind of walk us through that?
Yeah. First off, you got to be ready for the weather. It's Planned Parenthood is at 412 DB Todd in Nashville, Tennessee. Its location is kind of down in a valley, so it's always a little bit colder than what the temperature says. So come ready for the coldness right now. In the summertime, you got to be ready for the heat because it's hotter than usually what the temperature says. So other than that, you want to park on the street, anywhere on the street. Don't pull into their parking lot. And then just come down really to observe it, especially if it's your first time. Don't feel like you have to do something other than observe and pray. And so I will train them on how to see, how to hear, how to respond. I'll ask them to shadow me as I have conversations. And then I'll want them to ask questions on why we do what we do. And so we always have a question period and just kind of get some thoughts on what they're experiencing. So we had a couple yesterday that was new. And so I took them through the training and how to see things, how to hear things, and how to respond. But then as I was getting a rescue, the very first rescue, I invited them in to listen. And so as I'm engaging the two young ladies that are in the car, they're there listening. And so I even invited them to pray and ask questions as well. And then afterwards we debriefed. And that's a big part of it too, is debriefing and just making sure people have a opportunity to ask why I say things or why I do things or about the approach.
Mm.
So eventually, if you come consistently, we want you to engage. And so if you come enough and you feel comfortable, we'll challenge you to engage, to stand on a ladder, to engage somebody that's in a car or getting out of a car. And that's when it gets good. So
Yeah, and
that's usually a typical approach.
I don't think people understand that you do this 5 days a week,
Mm.
and so I can't imagine that there is a shortage of or that there's not a shortage of volunteers. Like you're always needing people to help you with this mission, and I know from the podcast you talked about you do training. So you go to churches and teach large groups, train them how to do this.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It the reason we need people is because if I'm engaging somebody, like yesterday I was engaging this couple, but then there's nobody at the front. And so I'm missing people, I'm missing opportunities because I'm engaged. I can't be in more than one place at a time. And so we need more people down there. And if we do, I mean, it's a baby's life is on the line. And so, yeah, as a matter of fact, I found out yesterday I'm going to Snohomish, Washington. Have you ever heard of that? I've never heard of Snohomish. It's just north of Seattle. I'll be there in January. I'll stand with the group on the street. I'll observe how they do things, give any tips that I might see that could help them, and then speak at the church on Sunday, preach at the church on Sunday. Just got right before I came on here, I was talking to a pastor in Northeast Ohio. They're driving an hour and a half to an abortion mill, and I'm going to go up there in March and stand with them 2 days. I'm going to do a training class with them one evening, and then I'm going to preach on Sunday at their church. And then in February, I'm in Charlotte. And so then there's somewhere in there's going to be San Diego. So, yeah, so the Lord's opening up doors. People are seeing that we have an effective ministry on the streets where we're getting lots of rescues. And so people want to know, all right, what are you guys doing that we're not? And so I'm thankful that we can share that and help other groups out that are doing what we do. And every situation's unique. Every Planned Parenthood sits in a unique environment. And so there's advantages that some have over others. And others are very hard, very difficult environments to get rescues. And that's just because the environment doesn't have anything to do with the approach. It's just the environment. And so, but if I can go up and give them just a little edge or something that they can see to help them get a rescue, then that's what I'll do.
Yeah, and obviously the goal is to have a team like yours in front of every Planned Parenthood in the country.
Yeah, there's over 600 Planned Parenthoods, and there's no reason we shouldn't have over 600 missionaries, full-time missionaries on the street. It breaks my heart to know that there's a Planned Parenthood out there killing children, and there's not a Christian there full-time. Um, it just it doesn't make sense to me. And so That's one thing I'm doing is I'm putting the word out. If the Lord is calling you to be a missionary, then step into it and let me show you how to get there, how to get established, and do it. So we've launched another missionary in Nashville recently. We've launched one in Memphis. I had a lady reach out to me from Northern Ireland today, and it's really challenging up there because the abortion mills are in the hospitals, and she works in the hospital. She's a nurse, and so she has been very outspoken on social media against abortion, and her job is in jeopardy, and so she's feeling a call to come out from being a nurse and be a missionary for the unborn. And so she's in an extremely challenging environment, but I'm going to walk with her and show her how to do it. And even in Northern Ireland, where they have buffer zones. So imagine this: they're they're aborting the children in a hospital. They have a buffer zone where he can't be 500 feet within the hospital. And so there's some real challenges there, but you still have to stand, you still have to contend, even with those obstacles. You still have to do it, and nobody's really doing that in Ireland, in Northern Ireland, and so she might be one of the first.
Yeah, isn't Ireland, they're pretty new to the whole abortion thing, right?
Yeah, they just passed some real aggressive laws,
Yeah.
and
I
so it
know,
is now within the last 2 years.
yeah, we talked on the podcast about Darren Mulligan, and the way that Darren actually got passionate about serving the unborn was they just moved here from Ireland about 7 or 8 years ago, and they got pregnant as soon as they got here. And this is before we or messengers were, anything really. And so they were broke. They're basically, living where they can live and just trying to make ends meet. And so Heidi, Darren's wife, went to a Planned Parenthood just to get health care for the baby, thinking that, Planned Parenthood was going to walk her through the pregnancy all the way up to the baby being born. And she was sitting in the examination room looking at the posters on the wall, and she saw the word abortion. Know what it was. From what I understand, that's what the way Darren tells it. And she could not believe when she asked about it, what they were telling her. She just could not imagine taking a baby's life from the womb. And that's when they were like, they got really serious about trying to make a difference for the unborn. So
Yeah, isn't it amazing how, and I don't want to call Heidi ignorant, but she just didn't have the knowledge that
right.
of what Planned Parenthood does, and it's amazing how many people don't. But then if you're just standing there,
Yeah.
and they're like, "Well, what do you?" They'll pull up and say, "What are you doing here?" Well, we're rescuing babies. What do you mean you're rescuing babies? And then you tell them, they're like, "Oh, okay. Why don't you go somewhere else?" Okay, and they turn around and leave.
Well,
Yeah.
if you think about it, I remember the first time I heard Planned Parenthood, I'm kind of like Heidi. I'm thinking, okay, I've never had a child before, and these guys are going to help mentor and coach me through being pregnant and being a new mother. And to me, that's what planned. Hey, I'm going to plan this life out,
Right.
and I'm going to plan to not have this life. And so the name's very deceitful, I think, even on its face value.
Yeah, and that was strategic. That goes back to Margaret Sanger. And when they, initially when they created this idea, it was to limit the population of people with black or brown skin. And it was called population control.
Mm.
And they realized I think it was the 50s or maybe a little bit earlier, like, hey, that's not a good name.
Mm.
And so they changed it to Planned Parenthood at that time.
Wow.
Mm.
Yeah.
Do you? I had somebody this week. I've been hyping your episode up to all my buddies and friends, and I was talking to one guy on the phone, and he wanted to know. I think he had I don't know if it was a very specific question, but it was, what services you all do in follow up. And I know we talk about this in the podcast, but we've got a little time. If you can maybe go a little deeper into that than we had time to do in the podcast.
It's really not limited to I mean, there's all kinds of stuff. Yesterday we had 3 rescues, but I ended my day there was a young woman that drove by and she had a flat tire. And so I could hear her tire wobbling. And so her window was down. So I yelled at her, "Hey, pull over." And she did. And so I went over and she got out of the car. She's 8 months pregnant. I changed her tire, put a spare tire on, and then drove her down to a tire place. We bought a tire. And so we do all kinds of things. I mean, all kinds of things. I've also dealt with this week. We have a mother, a grandmother, and a daughter talked them out of killing her grandchild, and so she's having car issues, and so we're walking through a process right now of getting her a car. I had a donor call me up yesterday and said, "Hey, I have a car I want to give away. Do you have a mom?" I'm like, "Yeah, it's perfect timing." And so we're walking through the process. That's probably about our 13th or 14th car to give to moms. And so we get to know the moms. And just like Laterica, she was living in a hotel. She was in a bad relationship. She felt alone. We knew we had to get her out of the relationship, out of the hotel. We got her housing. We got her a van. We got her a job and met needs as they came up. And so eventually she wanted to go back to Memphis, and we're still helping. So whatever she faces or whatever hurdles in front of her, we'll step up and just encourage her and help her. So every situation is unique. It could be job, it could be it could be housing, it could be electric bill, it could be food, it could be counseling, it could be addiction that they're facing, or discipleship.
Yeah.
So we have moms that are not only having these children, but they're overcoming and they're stepping into their faith and becoming really solid women of God. And that's when it gets really good. And so there's just a whole gamut. There's a mom that her name was Devin. I talked her out of abortion. She lived in Parsons, Tennessee. She only had 25% of her heart. And the doctor said, "You can't have this child or you'll die." And she was driving all the way from Parsons, coming down Interstate 40, and she was praying. And she said, "Lord, would you give me a sign if you don't want me to kill this child?" And she said the Lord spoke to her in the car and said, "If somebody says there's another way, then don't kill the child." So she got out of her car, and of course, those were my exact words right to her. "Hey, there's another way." And she got real emotional. And she told me about her situation, and she said, "What do I do?" And I said, "Devin, if you die and your child lives, that's an awesome legacy. And I don't want you to die, but think about this: you have 25% of your heart left, and you kill your child, and it's going to weigh heavy on you the rest of your life, and you don't want to do that." So she decided to let her child live. I remember when she had her child in Centennial Hospital, I walked in the room. She was getting ready to go back and have her child. Her family was in there, and they had no idea who I was. She didn't tell them, and they were looking at me like, "Who's the guy in the corner?" And she just smiled, and I smiled, and they never knew. During the delivery, they thought she was going to die, but she didn't. She had little Billy. And so we rejoiced, celebrated. It was a year later that Devin ended up dying, and her family finally found out who I was, and they sent a beautiful letter saying thank you. Devin's legacy lives on through Billy.
Wow.
And so one of the things we did for her was little Billy was crawling around on dirty carpet in her home, and so we recarpeted a whole home so Billy wouldn't crawl around on dirty carpet. So it's all kinds of stuff we do.
Is there a percentage of women that choose life that also choose adoption? And if so, do you guys help with that process?
I have over 150 families that want to adopt. I've never had an adoption.
Wow.
I've had some get close, but even in the cases of rape where the mom was raped and I talked them out of killing their child, they fell in love with the child throughout the pregnancy, and even going into the last week, they decided, you know what, I want to keep this child because I love this child.
Wow.
And so I've never had one. I had my closest adoption was a young lady from Guatemala, and she couldn't speak English. I talked her out of an abortion because she felt loved. Her and her husband felt loved. Um, and I was in the hospital when she had the baby, and I watched the child get placed into uh, a couple's hands, arms that I found online. It was a miracle how I found them. But, I watched them rejoice. And I remember walking across the hallway and going into the room of the mom that just gave birth. And I looked into her eyes and saw devastation.
Mm.
And I knew something was going on. And so I just kind of sat in between them and was like, oh no. And so there's like a 12 or 13-day waiting period. And I think it was on the very last day that I got a call from an interpreter saying she wanted her boy back.
Mm.
And so I had to call the family, the adoptive parents who were getting Christmas pictures made at the time with a baby, and tell them, y'all need to go home. I'll meet you at your house. I need to tell you something. So that was hard. But that was the closest we've ever come. That family ended up being godparents to the adoptive family, to the baby boy. His name's Lowry, and they actually are very involved in their lives. The Lord blessed them with their own child. They ended up adopting another child, so it all worked out.
Yeah.
One thing we haven't talked about too is immediately after a lady decides not to walk into Planned Parenthood, you also have a friendship/partnership with the pregnancy center. Just what is it, 7 or 8 blocks away, right?
Yeah, it's actually 4 or 5 blocks away. It's a Hope
Yeah.
Clinic for women.
Clinic.
And
So
so, we get the women up there, and we've increased the clientele about 25% just by getting women to go up there.
You said something, Scott, a while ago that made me think of a question. You mentioned grandma, and that just got me thinking. Generationally, what has changed about the views and opinions on abortion and the numbers of abortion increase or decrease through generations?
I think the opinions have changed because the technology has changed and science has changed. We have 4D ultrasound, and it's hard to deny now the value of that life in the womb with what we can see. In 1973, you couldn't really see anything, so they didn't know, but now we know. And so to ignore that, you really just have to be cold hearted. And so I think more and more people are realizing that it's not just a clump of cells. You're a clump of cells, and Kevin's a clump of cells, and I'm a clump of cells right now. Uh, that doesn't devalue us. And so science supports us. Religion has always, scriptures have always backed that it's a child in the womb. But it's also, the country's more divisive than ever. Even the political party that is for abortion used to say, on rare occasions, should abortion, be okay? And now it's to the point to where, hey, they celebrate the killing of children all the way up to full term, and even the killing of children that survive abortion, that you can go back and kill the child that survived an abortion. So it's really interesting to see the division in our country when it comes to it. It's disheartening.
Well, Scott, man, I just want you to know Kevin and I, and all the people that listen, all 15 of you that listen to our podcast, we appreciate you. We appreciate what you do and your ministry. And, we just want to say thank you, for saying yes. And we want to, all you guys that are listening, please go check out episode 3. There's a link to it on our Facebook page. It's on Apple. It's on Spotify, Google. I think it's on all of them now. And I encourage you guys to go and listen and hear more of Scott's story, and also be looking forward to next week when we've got Laterica on there. And Scott, I've got OperationSavingLife.org at the bottom of this video. Anywhere else people can go to either learn more about you, ask a question, make donations?
Yeah, OperationSavingLife.org or ScottHord.com. So both of those are the nonprofits I use to support this ministry.
All right.
And thank you guys. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good to see you.
Thank you guys for listening. And like I said, be sure to check out episode 4 with Laterica next Tuesday morning at 9 a.m.